Well, people are here tonight to learn as much as they can, and I think I should no longer be an obstacle. It would be good if you wanted to take part, just raise your hand and make questions, comments, whatever you think would be useful. I'll continue to chime in, and we really want to hear what people want to know from you, and you're uniquely situated. Who wants to lead off?
I'll ask, you should go back again.
Good question. I have some people sitting here who really don't want me to go back. Actually, both rows, my mom and my family. But I've been back to Hong Kong. I can go to Hong Kong. A lot of people don't know that. So I'm blacklisted. I've tried to go back to China. One of the things and one of the answers to Jerry's questions is when I got back here with really not more than the shirt on my back, I had to do something other than what I've done for a career. So I started being a Chinese English translator for human rights organizations. So the Communist Party doesn't like that very much. So up until now, I've been very clearly blacklisted.
You think your book will enhance?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to. I always argue that they've got bigger fish to fry, and it's tough because, again, as a journalist, you try not to have second thoughts, or else it prevents you from doing your job. But I genuinely do have people who would not like to see me rot in a prison cell. So I have to take that into account. I haven't made up my mind.
There are, of course, some leading American experts who aren't permitted to go back.
A lot. More than people know, actually. That's one of the really insidious things is there are more Americans blacklisted than anybody knows, and the reason is that nobody wants that to be publicized, because, especially for academics. So, two of the ones that we know best, Perry Link and Andy Nathan, that's really tragic because they were some of the leading experts, and both of them have been prevented from going since 1989, I think.
Yes.
And for me, it didn't matter as much because I was done. I had what I needed to write a book, and now I would really like to go back if I could, just to see my old Chinese friends. But
what about the internet? Your book really gets us to the turning point where the internet and social media are beginning to make an impact.
yeah, the internet was Promethean fire. I mean, it made a huge difference because the censorship was not as easy to impose anymore, but it's obviously, we're all learning it's a double-edged sword. So where, we all had these utopian ideals, the internet is going to make the world free. Well, it looks like the internet has done something a little more complicated than that. But I always tell people that China actually does have free media. It's social media, and they shut it down and then it takes a different form, but there is a sphere for free expression. But
what is that, WeChat?
Yeah, WeChat now. Previously in Chinese they call it Weibo, so that was micro blogs on Xinhuang, on Sina, and now it's moved over to Weixin, which is WeChat, kind of like Facebook for mobile devices.
So that's being shut down too on occasion.
To be quite honest, yeah, shut down and also very closely monitored,
Yeah.
but not completely shut down. I mean,
monitoring gives them some advantage to know what people are thinking.
And you think that if they're smart, that they should know that. And I'm a little bit, I differ from a lot of the pessimists. I think that Jerry and I are old enough to I assume you saw Taiwan under martial law.
You bet.
And so, everybody said the same thing about Taiwan that people say about China now. Oh, it's going to be this way forever. And Taiwan is a vibrant democracy now. So I always say, I still am optimistic. I think China is going to have a political watershed, and when and if they do democracy, they might do it better than us.
But right now, it's going in the wrong direction.
Well, it looks like it is, but then again, if you were him, so the president of China and the leader of the leader of the Communist Party is, and commander-in-chief, leader of the Central Military Commission is where his real power comes from. So he gets 2 5-year terms. So his first one is up now. So in October, we get to see if he can put in his replacements, and it won't surprise me at all if in his second term, if you had a plan to open up, what you would do is do exactly what he has done, which give none of the hardliners, because that's what happened in 1989. The liberals were too soft, and so they opened themselves up to being accused of being too soft by the hardliners. So this guy can't be accused of that. He's put every single, especially lawyers, human rights lawyers, in jail. But the thing is, that's exactly what you would do if you had plans to change that system, because then nobody could accuse you of being too soft. And then when the change comes, which is exactly, in some ways was the blueprint in Taiwan as well, because you tell me, I'll admit, I certainly didn't see it coming. I didn't see Chiang Kai-shek's son suddenly saying, we're going to end this hereditary dictatorship. So I still, think that's not unimaginable.
Taiwan, we saw a consistent expanding law
exactly.
for democracy and rule of law and human rights. Here, what we've seen is a reversal. Nevertheless, when Jiang Zemin became the leader, people said, wait till his second term, then you'll see things are going to liberalize. And then Hu Jintao came in and people said, wait till his second term. In both cases, things got worse. I don't believe that for a minute.
Yeah, I stopped making predictions. The good thing is this, it's easy to say what it's not going to be, but if you turn the tables, what is it going to be? Then everybody's
very distinct place. Questions, comments, disagreement? Yes, please.
I was curious how
Can you speak up?
Sure. I was curious how you recruited people to work for your publication when you started out. Like, where were you finding the people? How did you ensure that they would be okay?
It's a really good question. So what I started doing was just having little informal meetings in my downtown diplomatic compound apartment. All the foreign correspondents at that time were required to live in a compound, and I was able to keep my apartment and start the newspaper there. So I brought people around and really kind of talked myself into doing it. I needed to have, again, $50,000. It's not a lot, but it's enough to get yourself in a little trouble. And the first question was, you're not allowed to print anything in China without a license. So the very first question was, how are you even going to get this printed? And who printed it was the People's Liberation Army, because they're above the law. They couldn't care less. You give them money, they'll do anything. They don't care if you have a license or not. So that was taken care of. We brought the first Macintosh computers to China. We had to smuggle them in. That was exciting. We got these. We went to Hawaii because at that time you couldn't buy them in China. We set up the desktop publishing system. Prior to that, as the old saying goes, the press is free if you're rich enough to own one. But Apple computers made it possible to do it for a reasonable amount. So we brought the first computers in and we set it up in the living room. And the moment that first issue hit the streets, we didn't have to recruit anyone. People started flowing through the door.
Who were they? English readers?
What a lot of people don't realize is, they think, oh, this must have been for the expats. The vast majority of readers were local Chinese because, as you know, a lot of people don't realize, you go to Beijing, a lot of people speak English and speak it well. And so all they had was the China Daily, which, due respect, is a terrible newspaper. So, we were producing a professional quality publication. Everybody loved it. It was shocking to suddenly have a professionally produced, clearly independent newspaper in Beijing. And, people were not going to do it now. We would have, still very close friends of mine, a young Chinese guy showed up and was just, I'm working here. I don't care. I made him go fix my bike and, because there were, once we started, once you get going, and you make a promise, we're going to, keep publishing this every week.
It was a weekly.
We started bi-weekly for the first couple months, and what ended up happening that was interesting is when Hillary Clinton came, when in 1995, which my cousin Jill Savitt is here, so she remembers well, she came for that. And what happened was, all of a sudden, then the officials all said, hey, wait a second, what's this thing that's in all the news, well, the hotel lobbies and the embassies? We can't have this with all the International UN Women's Conference. So we were shut down after the first several months. And so what we did is we said, okay, we put on the very last issue, we made a big advertisement and said, Beijing Guidebook. And we knew we couldn't keep on publishing the newspaper every week or every 2 weeks. So we said, we're going to make a book instead. And I had the idea, hey, wait a second, how come nobody sells advertisements in books? And that turned out to be, that was our saving grace. So we went to Apple Computer, United Airlines. Each of them sponsored a chapter of the book for $10,000. So we were profitable before we even made the book. And from conception to completion, we produced the Beijing Guidebook in 4 weeks. So that covered us for the time of the UN Women's Conference. And it was actually our largest source of revenue because whereas people were afraid to advertise in the newspaper, for some reason they thought that the guidebook would be safer, and indeed it was. And that kept us alive. And then after the Women's Conference, we went back to publishing the newspaper. And it was never, until we partnered with the People's Daily, it was never legal, but the powers that be definitely knew we were doing it. And I had a little bit of an advantage. A guy that I mentioned to you, Gao Shiqing, he was the first PRC citizen to get a JD degree from Duke or from any U.S. university. So he was pretty high up. He had become a minister, and he stuck his neck out. And he found out, he came back to me and said, okay, in Chinese you say Haijian, Bijian, so they'll have one eye open and one eye closed. So they're going to let you go. As soon as they allowed us, as soon as we got some momentum, then advertising started pouring in. And if anybody here has started a company, that's one of the things that you learn is as soon as you start, your money goes out. But you either hit a point where you can't afford to go on and then you got to throw in the towel, or you start to go up. And that's what happened is as soon as anybody was willing to advertise, and especially in that guidebook, then people started piling on, and then it started getting real, and money really started coming in. And then we had a different problem, which was, okay, now you're a profitable business, you're this, fat pigeon here for the taking, but nobody thought they would let it go. Least of all me, they would let it go for 7 years.
How did you handle corruption?
A lot of people think I'm an idiot. I'm going to confess the commitment of a felony. I've bribed Chinese officials, which is a felony crime. But I didn't want to, but I got told by everybody, this is how you pay taxes here. I've run around with $50,000 in a paper bag and handed it to Chinese officials, and that's just how business is done there. And one of the things that I think is valuable about this book is journalists don't know this stuff. If you're a journalist, you never see any of these things. It's not until you actually do business in China that you peel away. And I know that you know this stuff as well. it's interesting to me because multinationals, you'll hear people say, oh, we don't do that. I think that's nonsense. I don't know anybody that does business in China that doesn't pay someone off in some way. They're not allowed to talk about it because it's so serious. And a lot of times, I know Jerry knows this, but they don't have a lawyer in the room when they have those conversations. The lawyer, would be obliged to, that would be a tremendous conflict of interest. But in fact, in the boardrooms, everybody knows this is how business gets done in China.
And what do you think about the prospects for the current investigation trying to stop corruption among the party elite as well as the lesser people?
It's, I don't like to be too extreme, but my knee-jerk answer is it's got nothing to do with corruption. He's just getting rid of his political enemies. There's no, when the party is policing itself, you're never going to get rid of corruption. I mean, you have, at every juncture, you have one guy who he says yes or no, and then you can do it. How is that guy not going to be paid off? That defies human nature in my experience.
Well, even the ones who want to resist often are under social pressure from their colleagues.
You can't. It's like Serpico. You don't take the bribe, and they're gonna whack you out. You can't have anybody clean in a dirty system. It's and you find that out. That's what seems so contradictory is they publicize the fact that you have all of these leaders amassing literally billions of dollars in illicit gains. Don't average people question how did that happen on your watch? Doesn't it reflect badly on the Communist Party itself? And of course it does. I don't know any Chinese people that are unaware of how things really work. Chinese people are, the most cynical people I know in the world, and I don't mean that negatively. They just know how the system really works. I know no Chinese person who believes that this is a sincere anti-corruption campaign.
Questions, comments? Yes, please.
Looking at what's happening in the South China Sea, do you see any foreshadowing of that during your time in Beijing?
Oh, yeah. Well, so the general perception is the army or the military, they saved the Communist Party's butts in 1989. They were required to bring them in order to end those protests. And once they came in, they didn't leave. So I don't think the civilians are completely in control. It's nobody knows how it really works, and it benefits them occasionally to be able to say, look, we can't control the military completely, so we better be careful. But I think it's a game of chicken. You have this thing called asymmetrical warfare. So now, even though the U.S. military is so powerful, China has technology now. They might be able to invade and occupy Taiwan because, we can't even bring our aircraft carriers. They have missiles that can take them out really reliably over the horizon. And so, I pray to God a war doesn't break out, but it was Mike Pillsbury. I was listening to an interview with him, and the interview asked him, is there a danger of war with China? He said, oh, absolutely there's danger of the U.S. ending up in a war with China. It will probably be accidental, but these two militaries, they're testing each other every single day. So, and that's what is so dangerous about appeasing Putin, because Crimea was just the beginning. China watches that and says, hey, you let that happen? Ooh, we certainly pay close attention to that. Or Syria, that matter, with Obama. If you draw a line in the sand and then they cross it and you don't do anything, guess what? They're going to cross it again. So, we live in really, really dangerous circumstances.
Well, this is not an issue your book deals with, but it is an issue that is going to have to be dealt with. Trump promises to to bolster our military in a way that could be very troublesome and risky. On the other hand, many of us hope we're not going to withdraw from Asia. So it's Mike Pillsbury is the only China specialist I know who so far has been associated with the Trump group. And he certainly is a hardliner.
Actually, there are more than him, and there are people that you know. I don't know that I'm at liberty to, there are more.
It hasn't appeared in the press.
No, it hasn't appeared. I mean, that's one of the good things about not being a journalist anymore is people tell me things and know that it's not gonna be on the front page the next day. There are more than him. I mean, at this point.
Yes, please.
Thanks very much for sharing. I'm curious now, since you have not been back to China in several years, how do you keep your ear to the ground? How do you ensure that you're getting the right information? And how has your perception changed, over 16 years when you haven't lived there?
Yeah, it's a really good question. If not for the internet, I would have been in trouble. Because of the internet, I in some ways, I feel like I'm better informed. When you're on the ground in Beijing, there are a lot of limitations. I don't know if any of you have tried to use the internet in a place where there are firewalls. It's really frustrating. So, here you're uninhibited. I talk to people in Beijing every single day, pretty much all day long, in fact. And any journalist worth their salt knows where to get accurate information. So, that's the only way. I certainly can't say that I have the view from the ground, although I spent plenty of time on that ground, and in terms of the stuff that we're talking about, not that much substantive has changed, but otherwise, Jerry and I are in the same closed groups that there's a lot of privileged information there, and we really participate on it. I mean, wouldn't you say that our circle of people are well informed?
Yes, and we shouldn't ignore the fact there's now a huge outflow of Chinese people here.
That's true too.
I can barely get any work done because so many people come through and they want to talk, and often they feel less inhibited. We can't be sure that our conversations in this country are not being overheard by the Chinese. They, in some cases, they are, certainly on the telephone, etc. But the fact is, there's a huge amount of information available to us here that wasn't available in the 80s. We didn't have the traffic.
It's just really the only limitation. There's not enough hours in the day. I mean, there's so much information. Whereas in the past, you kind of felt like you could read it all. You can't read it all anymore.
Yes, please.
So the 21st century has been described as the Chinese century, and I'm wondering what you see. What is positive? What do you see as positive? What do you see as opportunity? You alluded to the the political challenges and the potential contradictions. Do you see opportunity in?
It's a really good question, and I really welcome it. Jerry asked me, so what's the next piece of writing, and I've already started writing it. And so the positive view is my interest in China originally was traditional culture, and that's my source of optimism. I think that it represents, it will be the source of a true cultural renaissance in China. It's taking place in Taiwan. Taiwan is a real repository of traditional Chinese culture, and I think the whole world can benefit from it. It's got an environmental ethic. What I'm writing about is, since I've been back, I've had the privilege of spending time. The great story is being in San Francisco and starting a healing center and a tea house with an old Chinese friend of mine. And so that's the part of Chinese culture that I like the most. I never really liked the politics. It was just a job. Somebody had to do it.